it sounds awesome together.
Yeah, it's like a Betty board recording
Yeah.
sound you've got going on there.
Yeah, it's
I've
dope.
been to Aaron's studio. Full disclosure, it's pretty sweet. He's got a great setup there up in the southwest hills of Portland.
But full disclosure too, we started with a blue Snowball USB microphone clamped to a table on our porch. So yeah,
appreciate the transparency.
Yeah.
So when so why don't you just, if you don't mind, take us through a little bit of No Simple Road and the origin and what got you going on that idea.
Well, in 2017 on Father's Day, my son didn't know what to get me for Father's Day and went with my wife to go get a gift, and they were going to go to Powell's and buy a book on the Grateful Dead. And my wife was like, he's got every Grateful Dead book under the planet. Why don't you get him something else? And my son was like, okay, let's go to Best Buy. He likes tech stuff. And they were there, and he saw the Snowball microphones and was like, you know what? I'm going to buy Dad a microphone. And my wife was like, okay. And so for Father's Day, he gave it to me. He said, you know, Dad, you guys are always out on the porch talking about music. You should start a podcast. And I had thought about it years ago. Like, I was in design school years ago, and I thought about doing like a graphic design podcast or whatever, and just kind of blew it off. And so when he gave it to me, I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. I knew jack shit about podcasting, like nothing. I didn't know what a podcast host was. Only podcast I listened to was like Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell Family Hour, and that was it. Like, and I was really, really nervous about anybody hearing my voice. And I sat down on the porch on the 4th of July by myself in the morning and recorded the first episode of No Simple Road, which was just me telling the story by myself of going to my first Grateful Dead concert. And it took me a month to get the balls to put it out on the internet. And in the first episode, I said, I'm going to call this podcast No Simple Road, thinking I was quoting the lyrics to Ripple. And I caught it after I was getting ready to put it out and was like, oh, I misquoted the lyrics. I guess I'm just going to roll with it. And I put it out, man. And like 4 people listened to it. And then I interviewed my best friend, Apple, talked about going to his first show, and then had my wife on and talked about how we got together. And it actually like started gaining traction. Like, people started listening to it. And I was like, what the hell? We're hanging out on our porch. Like, people are listening to us just talk shit out on our porch. And then maybe, I don't know, maybe 25 episodes in, we'd like go to shows and the next morning, still in the afterglow, haven't slept, like would turn on the mics and recap going to the show the night before. And we were out on the porch again one day, and I was like, you know what? Instagram, you can like DM anybody. I'm going to DM O'Teal and see if he'll come on the show. And because why not? All I can say is no, right? And I DM'd him, and in like 5 minutes, he was like, yeah, sure, here's my phone number.
Wow.
And I was like, never done an interview in my life. And so that like started us having musicians on the show. And now it's been 6 years, and we have over 300 and something episodes, and we've been all over the country and been the official podcast of a bunch of festivals, and we're doing live stuff now, and it's been a trip. It all started with, yeah, sure, that sounds like it might be cool.
It's been pretty amazing to watch the No Simple Road momentum, and just from as a casual observer and as a friend of Aaron's, it's just amazing. It just seems like it keeps getting the show just more traction and just more opportunities. And the people that they've been meeting, Bill Walton was recently on one of their episodes, and I remember one of the first episodes that I listened to is the Dave Schools episode. And it's interesting because Brian, we talked about this on a previous, like our first, maybe our second Venue Llama podcast, but Brian was Widespread Panic's original webmaster. And that kind of came to fruition through I think Dave Schools reaching out to you, right? So kind of an interesting tie in there. You guys have probably been to some of the same shows too. I know Brian, what was your first show? 7-2-89?
Yes. Nice. Yeah, that was my first one. I would say, but I don't like to count that, even though that was like my first. I was there. I felt like I was a guest of a friend's sibling, but I was still kind of, super green. But I think 10-14-89, I like to think of as really my first show. How about you, Aaron? When was yours?
2-10-89.
Oh, excellent.
At the LA Forum. And I can't think of a more impactful thing in my life besides meeting my wife or having a kid than that first head opening Grateful Dead experience of realizing what the fuck is really going on and that this isn't some lame country band. Because I had no frame of reference for Grateful Dead. I knew Truckin' and Casey Jones. That was it. I was really, really into punk rock and thought I was super cool. And and that first experience that I had was so immense. It was so huge, dude. It broke me. When I think back on it now, it was terrifying, but in the best kind of a way. It was so terrifying that I didn't want to ever do anything else. I wanted to know everything I could about it. I walked into that show I went with a bunch of guys that I kind of knew and got puddled in the lot, and then they kind of ditched me, and I knew I was so high, and people were walking into the Forum. That's the only reason I knew to go into the show at that point, was to follow the other people that were going in. And I had a Misfits t-shirt on and a mohawk, and I walked in there playing Feel Like a Stranger, and my head just went never leave that. Never leave. Yeah, it was amazing.
That is so funny. I mean, I think, you mentioned that having no frame of reference. And I remember thinking, because I same thing. The only thing I knew about that band was t-shirts that I would see at the amusement park,
Yeah.
And I just assumed, because it was Skulls and Roses and things like that and Skeletons, I'm like, this must be some sort of heavy metal band. And then, then I heard a tape, and it was, in this case, a friend's sibling, an older brother who, brought home a vault from college.
Right.
And I was in 8th grade or something. And I was like, oh, not it. I had no clue. And just listening to it, I was just so intrigued, because it was so different from I was listening to maybe I went through Led Zeppelin and the Beatles, but then I was at that point also listening to Wasp and Rat and the Crew and all that. and then boom, here's this Grateful Dead. I'm like, this is really interesting. And there's so much of it. And then, yeah, same kind of thing. I'm like, I'd like to know everything.
Yeah, man. I left that show, and I was living in Vegas at the time. I was at the LA Forum. I left the show. I went back to Vegas. I think I was back for maybe 2 months. and I started making plans to like sell all my shit and buy a school bus. I was like, I'm going on tour. Like, I want to know it all.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And it was such a good time too. Like, not that I knew any better, but like now looking back, Jerry was clean, like pretty much in '89, and they were playing so good. And Brent was just like locked in with them. And those like end of '89 shows are so great. Like, we were so lucky to get on then.
Yeah, you guys are lucky. It's funny. So Brian and I, grew up in the same town, and the way that I got introduced to the Grateful Dead was from the rabbi of our temple. His daughter, she gave me a tape. I think I was in 8th or 9th grade. We used to go on trips with them, and I just remember listening to this tape and just like being so sort of like confused but intrigued that there was just like all this music and no lyrics, and it was just so different. It shook my paradigm of music.
Right.
And I remember like Desolation Row was on that tape, and I had was into Dylan from a pretty early age. But anyway, so I came close to seeing a Brent show. Like the first time, and actually the only time I've never gotten into a show, we went to Nassau Coliseum. I think it could have been 328.90 or 329.90, and went and just walking around the lot in Nassau Coliseum. It was just like you were talking about, just mind blowing and earth shattering, just like seeing this. I felt like I was in Woodstock, I knew about Woodstock and watched the Woodstock movie, and I just saw this alternate culture, subculture. And I was like, and growing up in Long Island, and then, seeing this culture on Long Island, it was just complete clash. And it just shook my world, just like not even going into the show and seeing the music. Then I got to see them a year after, but I'm bummed that I didn't get in that show. It was, an epic show. Would have seen Brent, but it was still, even just being in the lot, it was life-changing as well. And I also swore from that day on, I'm like, I'm never gonna not get in. And that's kind of been my, ethos to this day. There's always a way into the show. If you want to get in,
This is
whether
true.
you have to bribe the usher or no gate crashing, but there's always a way in.
I have a buddy here that he would put on this like a security vest,
I
just
have one,
and just roll into the show like all the time.
Yeah.
There's always a
my
way.
buddy did that at Bonnaroo. I have some safety vests for some past Halloween costumes, and he got into Bonnaroo every day, put on the safety vest, and acted like he knew what he was doing. A clipboard helps sometimes.
Yeah, or a hard hat. I want to say though too, like before going to that first show, like the summer before, I think I was 18. The summer before, I had really like discovered LSD, like really discovered doing acid a lot. And this group of cats that I met in LA were already into the Dead. And the one dude that I knew was a really like voracious bootleg trader. Like he had bootlegs of like Jim Morrison drunk in a club and like all kinds of crazy Pink Floyd bootlegs and every Dead bootleg you could imagine. And he had recordings of the acid tests on cassette. And we had spent a night at his house tripping, listening to, it's called the Acid Test Graduation. I think you can actually get recordings of it now. And this is before I ever had gone to a show. And the experience that I had listening to that in that room in Van Nuys in like 88 was not very far off from the experience I had at that first Grateful Dead show. And I remember after I had that experience of listening to the acid tests and like, wow, there's a whole other world here to explore. When I would hear the Dead, I didn't understand what I was hearing, but I could feel that there was that same thing going on, but my young head didn't know how to like process or put it together, make the Legos go together. You know what I mean? And then I think when I walked into that first show, that's kind of why it was such a big deal. It was like, oh shit, this is like that same thing, but like really big. And there's a lot of people that, because I thought we were like onto something, like we had found some secret thing that nobody knew about. Yeah, the cat's out of the bag now, man. And and it was just like the realization that there's other people that were doing that thing, man. It was awesome, and it still is. It's still like, it's one of the best things. That's when I met you, I was like, this is my brother, man. I know this guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's still amazing how it's still manifesting in other ways, you know, like with your podcast, for example, and Venue Llama, like it's all, you know, inspired by that, or largely by just that community and all of that. And jumping like ahead a little bit, speaking of, you know, you were talking about the acid tests and such, and I know that you just podcasted, or maybe not podcasted, but you're at the Oregon Country Fair, you know, where there's all that old school, you know, Dead family. Did you have a chance to meet any of those folks that were like at the acid test, like Ken Babs or any of those cats?
No, we've actually had Ken Babs on the show though. And
okay, nice.
That's one interview that I was terrified to do. For real, man. Like,
yeah,
you don't know what you're going to get with those guys, but at fair, they have a thing called the midnight show on Saturday night. And it's like the show for all of the volunteers, because the volunteers, the 20,000 people that are working fair, don't get to see all of the entertainment that's going on because they're working. And I had again, I've never been to fair, so I didn't know what the midnight show was. The two guys that MC the midnight show have been doing it forever. And the one guy, God, I can't remember his name, his last name. His first name is Reese. He's the son of the guy that created the Steal Your Face.
Oh, wow.
And the other guy's name is Charlie Brown. They've been emceeing this thing forever. And about maybe 20 minutes in to the midnight show, is like, oh my God, we're at an acid test. Like, that's what this is. I had no idea that's what we were showing up to. And I was so stoked, like having had that experience when I was a kid and my whole adult life. Like, I've been like, oh man, that's such a drag that I missed that. I really wanted to experience something like that, you know, where music isn't the focus, but you're still in that psychedelic space and there's strangeness going on, but there's entertainment, but you're part of it. And it was happening. And I was like, oh my God, this is the happiest place on earth. Screw Disneyland. Like, this is it. Yeah. And there are a lot of those like old heads there. I mean,
they just seem to pop out of the hills in that area.
Yeah, out of the trees, and like some of them hanging. But like the way that the midnight show is set up, there's like a hierarchy at fair of like how the blankets are set up in the meadow for the main stage. And like, if you've been around fair for a long time, that's the blankets of the people that are like up front. And we just so happened people that we were with were old fairheads. So we were like up there with all the folks that have been going forever. And it was quite the experience. If you want to hear about it, listen to last week's Rewind.
Yeah, I do want to hear about it. And I have been planning to tune into that episode. I just listened to your the one from Skull and Roses. I think since you were at fair, you guys missed a week and played that episode, which was cool to hear that one as well. Yeah, can't wait to.
Can I ask you a question about Venue Llama?
Please do.
Yeah, man. So you had told me the idea for it a while back, and I'm just curious. Like, you guys are the ones that thought it up.
We so Brian and I have an interesting relationship. Like I was saying, we grew up in the same town, went to the same. Brian's a year older. We went to the same elementary school, and we had a few close mutual friends growing up. We never like knew each other super well, but we, got along well and, knew of each other. And then, we went to high school together and we got along. Like I knew that he was into the Dead and, was a cool dude. But fast forward, I was in law school in Denver. I'm giving you the long story here.
Yeah, no, I love it.
But I was, I talked about this on one of our previous podcasts. I was in the law school library, like should have been studying law, but I was, searching, checking out panic dates or whatnot on their website. And I see at the bottom of the screen, like website, whatever, by, Brian Schafer, like saw his name on there. So I, clicked on the link. Like, is this Brian Schafer from Half Hollow Hills, Dix Hills, New York? And he's like, yep, it sure is. So we, so this was like about 10 years after high school, and we hadn't like communicated, I don't think, or seen each other. And we got back in touch and kind of, he was, we just talked Panic for a little bit. And then when I ended up moving to Oregon a couple of years later, Brian plays music. He's a great musician also. And he was touring with Eric Martinez. They're in a band called B&E. Eric Martinez, not sure if you're familiar with him. He's played with Panic a time or two and plays with Bloodkin, Jerry Joseph. Anyway, they were going on a little tour of Oregon, and he came out and he was like one of the first people to ever play at Fire on the Mountain in Interstate, that small restaurant. Yeah. And so anyway, so we, kept in touch, since then, and we're on the same Panic message board, and we just kind of communicate from time to time. And I would say about a year ago, like, I've been kind of just going to shows all these years. I've just always, just had questions, and I guess it just really kicked in like about a year or so ago that everybody has questions about the venue, and people are always asking like a lot of the similar things, like where's a good place to eat and drink before the show? Where should I stay? What is security like? And it's like, it's just everybody, like how is there not something, where people can go, like a centralized place to find all this information? And, you'd see threads on Facebook or Reddit or whatnot. But I was just like, I feel like we need a central location where all this information is in one spot, and we can all kind of like, share what we've learned. So I was thinking about it, ran the idea by some friends. I was like, yeah, that's a really good idea. We that's so necessary. So then I was thinking about, okay, well, I don't have any sort of background building a website or a platform. I was like, who can I talk to? Who can I run this by? So, and I was a little, it's one of those things where sometimes you have an idea and you're just like a little nervous about it. You're like, people are going to think this is stupid or whatnot. Anyway, I sent Brian a message. It's like, here, I have this idea. What are your thoughts about it? Like, I feel like there's a need for a platform where people can, like we were talking about, learn about venues. And he's like, yeah, it's got a lot of legs, this idea. I was like, well, is this in your wheelhouse? And he's like, it sure is. And Brian has started, let Brian talk, but he started, like a tape trading site for Panic. And Brian, man of many talents, is like he was a stick BMX bike trickster in his day. Like the guy can do insane stunts on a bike.
Okay.
Like just like crazy shit. I don't even like know how to describe like the tricks that he does. He can probably like name them. But anyway, he had started like some BMX website. So that's kind of how it started. And it's just been really cool to just like get to know him more than in a lot of ways than ever did. We kind of chat like every day, and it's just been fun. Venue Llama has been great. But it's also just been great, like talking to Brian and like bringing up these old stories from back in the day and our mutual friends and stuff like that. So it's been super cool, and it's just nice to like when you work with people who kind of speak the same language, and where it's just kind of fun. We'll just kind of like you and I will share like, all right, you got to check out this version of Cosmic Charlie or whatever, just shit like that. So that's kind of what the long scenic route of how this has come to be. And it's and it's cool to and like Brian, like Aaron and I, like we met how long has it been, Aaron? Like about a year ago. Or like Aaron had reached out to me about sponsoring his podcast, about sponsoring No Simple Road. He, I think, knew of Fire on the Mountain, Buffalo Wings, and felt like it would be a good tie-in. And he had reached out during the pandemic. He was like, it's just like not a great time for this. Let's revisit this conversation down the road. And then like at Phish Dicks last year, we had like reconnected about the conversation, and like during the show, I was at the last few shows, and he sent me a text like, "Hey man, we hadn't even met." He's like, text me during the show, just like, "I'm just thinking about you." I was like, "That's so cool." I'm like, we haven't even met, but like we can. There's something we can tell that we're gonna be brothers, and we ended up meeting at the show the next day, and it was great to meet him and his wife Mel, and then we met up at Fire in the Mountain a couple of weeks after that show, and just talked the we said we were going to meet to talk about the sponsorship, but just ended up hanging out, and it was like just hanging out with an old friend. And it's been great to sponsor No Simple Road. It's great to just be to sponsor something, but just really be just proud to do it, and great to see
that's cool, man.
their progress and their just what's happening with them. And it's like we were talking about earlier, just the Grateful Dead scene, and it's like we're saying, it's still happening. And
for sure.
So hope I answered your question there.
No, 1,000%. And you know what, man, like in hearing your guys' story, like it seems like the best stuff happens that way. Do you know what I mean? Like when we try too hard, stuff doesn't really work out as well. But when it's synchronicities and cool ways that stuff happen, that's when the best shit comes to light.
That's kind of, I mean, I agree completely. And I just want to say, Jordan, I fully agree. Like the project itself is, technically it's pretty challenging in a lot of ways, but personally it's been awesome. I get to totally reconnect and get to know Jordan in a way that I hadn't. And that in and of itself is very rewarding. And like, I think what's so interesting about this band, and so when everyone asks, how can this band keep going in whatever version of it? How can people still keep coming, for 50, 60, whatever it is now, and it's because of these feelings and these connections and these bonds that have been forged through this band. And like, one thing that you had mentioned, Aaron, that I don't want to gloss over is that you had interviewed Oteil. And to me, Oteil is such a common thread. He's one of these guys who threads between almost like so many, and personally for me, like so many different bands that I've had touch points with. And so like to see someone like first Oteil, who was in the 90s, with Colonel Bruce, right? And now Colonel Bruce, he touches Panic, obviously, and Oteil kind of weaves his way into the Grateful Dead. And by that time, now I'm done with the Grateful Dead. Now I'm into Widespread Panic and learning about Bruce and learning about Oteil. And to see now Oteil playing and on stage with Bobby fucking Weir, it's just so interesting. And, I don't think these threads will keep going. So like, and however people may have felt about John Mayer now or in the past, whatever, he's now in the fabric. And it'll be interesting to see where it goes, because I think in many ways, this won't really stop. It'll just keep evolving in some version. And then the people, the community keeps it going in anything they touch. And that's why I think some of these projects wind up being so special,
Well, and first of all, Oteil disabused me of my notion that rock stars were different than us. First of all, he quickly disabused me of that misconception. I realized very fast when we started talking to him that I was just talking to another bro that happens to be really fucking good at playing the bass, right? And so that was amazing to like have that taken away, and it made me see the music differently. And also in talking about how there's these different touch points, one of the beauties of doing these projects, No Simple Road or Venue Llama, it's exposed me to a lot of different music that I wouldn't have otherwise probably found out about. And what I've realized is that this thing, that whatever the Grateful Dead birthed into consciousness or the world or understanding or whatever, has taken root and taken form in a lot of different ways now. And people talk about the jam community. There are so many bands now that are amazing that would not exist had the Grateful Dead not started doing what they're doing. And those bands all are having experiences like we're having, where you guys reconnected and then you start Venue Llama, or we start doing No Simple Road, and then all these amazing things happen. They reconnected with a buddy from high school, and he just happens to play bass, and now they were both Deadheads when they were younger, and now they're playing music together, and this band is now playing Red Rocks or whatever. It really does never stop. The music really does never stop, because it's like this continual unfolding from the lives of the people that have had the experience, reimagining and sharing that with the world through their lens and their experience. And I was one of those heads for a very long time, up until starting No Simple Road, that was like, it's not the Grateful Dead, music's bullshit, I don't want to hear it. Like, I couldn't listen to Phish. Everything else was lame. And you guys are gonna laugh. A Pigeons Playing Ping Pong came here, and a buddy of mine was like, "Are you going to the show?" And I was like, "I don't know, I'm on the fence." And he was like, "Get off the fucking fence and come fly with the flock." And we went to that show, and that show opened my head up to the wider scene. I was like, oh, there's more going on that I am not paying attention to, that needs to be looked at. And that started the whole like trail of bands that have been on the show, of us like mining all the up and coming stuff that's out there too, because I want to know, you know what I mean? Some of these, I'm 51, like I say kids, these guys are in their 20s or early 30s. These guys are talented, extremely heady cats that are in these bands that are coming up. There's bands like, I don't know, a million of them, Sickard Hollow.
Well, yeah. I've learned, sorry to cut you off there, Aaron, but I will.
Go ahead.
Yeah. From just knowing you and listening to your show, like I've been introduced to some bands. Like I was listening, like you guys interviewed the Jaunty.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so good.
And I've only listened to them. I just saw Neil Young a couple nights ago, but the one Jaunty show, I turned it on nugs.net. They were playing Neil Young. Like everybody knows This Is Nowhere, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, damn, this is pretty good. Those guys were doing it justice. And those guys seem pretty cool. And it's awesome that it seems like you have these bands coming to you now, like wanting to be on your show.
We're lucky enough now to, like, after 6 years we have relationships with 4 or 5 publicists that are like pretty seminal in the jam community that have a lot of these bands on their rosters. So when they have new shit coming out, they're hitting us up now. But man, I'll be honest, like, a lot of what you see coming on No Simple Road is from me surfing Instagram and watching clips of stuff that's like suggested.
Yeah.
And so we can thank AI for turning us on to good music, I guess. But there really is nothing like this community. And taking it back to Venue Llama, when you told me about the idea, I was like, of course. You know what I mean? Like you, why isn't this already a thing? I can't believe nobody's thought of this. And it has the potential to be its own like ecosystem outside of just a website that people go and give other people information about venues. Yeah. It's I told you this already. I was like, Venue Llama has the potential to be gigantic, dude.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. That's awesome. Hearing that, awesome coming from you. And it's been cool. Like Brian and I will have, we were doing like weekly Zoom meetings and just we were just spitball and thinking about like all these different avenues for it. And like it gets, to the point where like, all right, we just got to kind of, just keep it simple at first, but it's going to be really interesting, to see where it goes. Cause we've been talking about it or mentioning it on like some Reddit threads and just, talking to people. And there have been some like musicians and managers of bands who are like, I really could see this being helpful for us, just as far as musicians, like knowing where to play and just from their perspective, just knowing what they're getting into as a musician. And also, promoters talking about, a lot of times promoters can miss the mark as far as the venues that they pick, for select shows. And, we see that in the future as helping them hone in their decisions, because we hear promoters like just being like shocked. They're like, why did nobody show up at this show? Just it's a great band, a cool city or whatever. And sometimes, it's hard to know everything about all the different venues. And, maybe a venue like is in a cool city, it's ostensibly cool, but security sucks, and is mean, and people don't go, and that happens, and we're kind of hoping that Venue Llama will help shed light on things like that, and just help all parts of the music community.
Yeah, there's a whole side of it too, of like the backline of venues too, of like, what's the green room like? How are they handling their rider?
Exactly.
What kind of equipment do they have available on their backline? That kind of stuff. Like nobody knows that, from venue to venue, except the people that have played there. And to have a resource for those guys to be able to, I just like, not even the bands, like the booking agents and the PR people and the tour managers knowing what's up beforehand. Because part of the cool thing about doing No Simple Road is we have worked really, really hard at like creating real relationships with the people that we have on the show. 9 times out of 10, it's not just we interview somebody for an hour and we never speak to them again. Like we've become friends with a lot of these people, and a lot of the bands have stayed here at the house, right? So we've gotten a look at like what they go through on the road and some of the bullshit that happens to them that's really difficult and that nobody would know had we not seen the inside of it. You know what I mean? And to have a resource for them that they can use to kind of mitigate some of that pain out there on the road is really cool, man. Think about like whatever your art is or your passion, Venue Llama, whatever, No Simple Road, and you're working your hardest to put it out there. But what putting it out there means is like 1 hour or 2 hours a night, and then you're traveling to do it again and sleeping on floors and uncomfortable and eating in gas stations. And like those guys that are out there, like, I'm not talking about Phish and Panic. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the next tier down. Those guys are putting it on the line for us to have an experience, man, and to share their art with us. And I just feel like anything that any of us can do to like lighten the load for them is necessary, you know?
Well said, man. Right on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's what's intriguing about the whole. I mean, to me, it's kind of like a mission, right? So like you have all these pockets of information that are out there, and they exist in some capacity, but we're trying to cull out the good stuff, trying to extract the nuggets that people need, and try to, at the same time, obviously bring people in and generate some sort of community to keep it thriving. And at the same time, we have all these different evolutions of technology and how people are communicating, and that changes way rapidly. Like, I mean, it's unbelievable, but the internet is built for that, and these types of, this new media is built for these niches, or and that's kind of any subculture, any community in internet terms, right, is kind of a niche. And but there's a way to bring all those folks together and centralize it. And Jordan mentioned the BMX stuff, and it's so analogous to that, because what was happening was, simplest terms, there's BMX, and then there's like, there's big air BMX, the ramps, and then there's street, right? We've seen that, people doing rail slides, and then there's flatland, which is the stuff that I would do. There's, flatland, and that's because if it's, low threshold for big crashes was never something that had big support, right? You might see it on the X Games here and there, and eventually they phased it out. In any case, it was like the redheaded stepchild of BMX, and we reached out and found all the pros who were, it's exactly like this. They travel to do these contests to win maybe $300, travel, sleep on floor, same exact thing. And so we tried to bring them all together, get pictures of these guys, this is in the 90s, get footage of them. And it was the same thing. And we brought it all together and became kind of an authority. And that is kind of what we want to kind of do, is have an authoritative kind of pull on the whole Venue thing outside of, Live Nation or any of these other entities, more so for the fans and for the community to exchange this information. However that might be. Is it through snarky comments on the internet or Instagram or YouTube on our videos? Not exactly sure. Is it going to be through the website specifically? Probably. It's probably going to be a lot of those things. And whatever that is that through the podcast, through, we're going to explore all these things. And every time we do it, it seems like, there's more out there.
Mm-hmm. It never ends,
that's what's so interesting.
Yeah. And I think one thing, like a common thread, and like one of the things that's so unique about this community and why it does thrive, is that it's not profit driven. It's when you go to dead shows back in the day, or even like shows these days, you get the feeling like people aren't there to rip you off. Like you can get a grilled cheese for $1. You
Right.
know, we're ultimately there to, have a good time and be cool with each other and help each other out. And that's, like I know, with your podcast and Venue Llama, like that's not our goal to, make $1 million or whatever. Like we're trying to contribute to this community that's been just so integral to our lives, and I think that's part of what was always so cool to me about going to a Dead show. It's just like, and this community, it's just like you feel like you're part of it,
Brother.
and you want to contribute in your own way,
Yeah.
like I always liked, it's just amazing how many people vended or vend, like when you went to a Dead show, when you go to like a Dead and Co show, and that's
at a loss.
yeah at a loss, like profit for sure, but like like the relationships that you make, and just
Oh yeah.
the feeling that you get for like providing like good food for someone, and just like the bartering.
It's the best.
Yeah. I remember getting back to No Simple Road, that you guys you interviewed Peter Shapiro on one episode, I believe, right?
Yep.
And that was also part of Venue Llama. I remember like one night I'm an insomniac, and it was like 3 a.m. I think I listened to your interview with him, and I was listening to the Jam Bass podcast with him, and it was just inspiring. And it's like, I want to, there's more that I want to do, to help out, this community. And I feel like I'm going to go for it. I'm going to, and part of it too, like, like opening a restaurant, Fire in the Mountain, Grateful Dead, and inspired too. And that was, something I always loved, the idea of opening a restaurant and serving food to people, because something that everybody needs, and you can really like foster community. But I, want to keep it going and branch out and do other things. And and I think just this community is inspiring, and it's still, there's still a lot of, like, kind of, Brian, what you were saying, a lot of what is happening like in online type ways, like a cash or trade platform, it's just, that's the reverberation of all of that, like trying to like give access to tickets to people, but not ripping them off, and I think that's what part of what makes this, and it's good to make money, and people need to make money and support themselves, but I think just in the scene, a lot of times there's also the thought of like, I also want it to be fair, and help people at the same time. And that's not always the case in everyday society.
No, man. No. And go ahead, Brian.
I was just going to say, especially when you look at, like, in many ways, the other side of the music or the live entertainment industry, right? Which in many ways is these days, with all these different audio platforms, maybe not as friendly to the artists as they once were, or whatever this has evolved into. There are plenty of artists who are not happy with what's happening with, like I said, all these different audio services. And so it is nice to be able to do something like, and you mentioned, like, it's not Phish, it's the guys sweating it out in the small clubs and stuff. And some of them, even if they're playing big rooms, they're still sweating it out, as and yeah, so I think there's an avenue to do something specifically for those artists, but because their slice of the pie seems to be getting smaller and smaller. And we all have to keep in mind of what's happening too with the streaming. Like, in a way, you have Phish who are doing it perfectly, right? They offer the streaming for everybody, and they still are able to, get people to the venue. We're going to see what happens. Like, is that going to hurt smaller venues? Is it going to help them? Does live music become more of an internet event? Like, there's some
just talking about this today.
Yeah. Or like if you look at some sports or some like, what's been popping in my feed is this robot dancing. It's the weirdest thing in the world, but it's a massive thing. But it only, if you look at the events and the dance battles that are happening, there's like, maybe 50 to 100 people there, but they're bringing in millions of views. And that is, and so like I said, there's so many things that are changing and being disrupted, so to speak, through technology and the way people communicate in general. So just, something to keep in mind.
There's a couple of parts to that. First of all, what my experience is with the Grateful Dead community and the wider jam community is, if you're doing something, because this thing is alive outside of the people that are in it, there's a consciousness, there's a collective energy of this thing that's there. It's a thing, it's a real. And if you're doing something from a place of like wanting to help and passion and love, this thing responds. I've experienced it with No Simple Road. That's the only reason that we've kept going as long as we have, is because the thing has responded to us and has helped us grow. That isn't me, I only know so much. I'm, whatever, but like the thing has responded to us and helped us grow. And that's one of the really amazing parts of being in this thing. I don't think that exists very many places, right? I think it has to do with the psychedelic nature and all that. But talking about the technology, I think that this is just my opinion. What do I know? But there was like a sea change that happened in like 2008 when we went from cell phone to iPhone. If you think about before iPhone, we had cell phones, they stayed in our pocket. It wasn't like everybody didn't really have one. It wasn't that big of a deal. We weren't staring at them all the time. There was nothing to stare at, right? Then the iPhone came out and this thing happened, and now we're all staring at our phones all the time. We're right now on the cusp of another one of these changes that's getting ready to happen with the Apple Vision Pro. It's going to change the way that we consume media. Within the next 5 years, I think that it's going to be as ubiquitous in the household as an iPhone is, maybe a little shorter even. And I was talking to Mel today about this, like, what if at a Phish show or Panic show, they had 360-degree cameras placed on the floor, and you could buy a virtual ticket and put on your Vision Pro and be on the floor at a Panic show and see the light show and be standing there, but you're in your living room. And then at set break, you can take the fucking thing off and hang out on your own couch and pee in your own toilet. You know what I mean? A lot of people are going to do that.
Yeah, that's wild to think about. Even wilder if you could, like, pee in like the venue toilet, like
while you're I'm with you. And it would make set breaks so much less weird too. You could just take the thing off and be home.
I'd be interested to see, where some of the big entertainment companies, and more importantly, their lobbying groups, how they fight something like that. But it's Apple. That'll be very interesting.
It's coming,
scary.
Man.
Yeah.
That thing,
I don't doubt it.
That thing is whatever. Again, just my opinion. The problem with VR has been that it's closed off, and you're closed off from the rest of the world. This thing doesn't close you off. You're still in your environment, and it's right here. And as human beings, like, we want bigger, faster, quicker, more clearer, awesome stuff. And this is that. And I don't know, man, I can't afford to fly across the country to go on this summer Phish tour. I would love to, but if I could pay like $400 to be on the floor at all the shows, I think I think I would do it. I'd be in,
Yeah. And we'll see, like, does Phish harness this, like, who, of course they would, right? They're the band who would,
right.
somehow make some sort of way to make it worth your while if you're going to do it, to still whatever. I don't even know, but I know their team would come up with something.
Well, and also like the Sphere in Vegas, that talk about a venue, dude. Have either of you gone to the website for the Sphere?
No, I'm ashamed to be
I
a
urge
Venue
you
Llama.
and everybody that's listening, go to the website for the Sphere and do a deep dive. Go down the rabbit hole with this thing. They can like change the temperature by 40 degrees in 10 seconds in the venue.
Oh, wow.
They can pump smell into the venue. So like if you're watching a movie in there of like a field of lilies or lavender, they can pump lavender smell. So you
Smell-o-vision.
There, yeah, there's 100, I think it's 160,000 unique speakers in the venue. So they could like, Jordan, if you and I are sitting next to each other, they can target sound at an individual. You won't hear it and I will.
Wow. That's cray.
It's
wild. Yeah, that sounds like its own Venue Llama podcast episode. We should try to get some of those folks on here. That's super cool. I've got a question just like tying in like your podcast and venues, and like I know that you've done your podcast. Like I know you have this awesome studio at your house where you are right now, which is great, and I'm sure it's super comfortable. How does it feel like when you do podcasts like off site, like when you're at a festival? Like I know you've done the Peach Festival before and some other stuff. Like how is that when you're doing your podcast away, so to speak?
It's been a learning experience, big time.
Yeah.
So we've done Summer Meltdown, Northwest String Summit twice, the Peach Festival. We did live at Country Fair. We are gonna be doing live at Ophelia's in Denver the night before the Dick's Run. But it's a learning process, man. I dig it. I like being in front of a crowd that I'm getting feedback from, like whether it be verbal or otherwise. I like having the feeling of having other people, because when we're recording here in the studio, it's flat. It's just the three of us and there's no audience. So having the audience component to it is really awesome. But
just changes things around how you approach things.
Yeah.
I've been watching Smartlist. I listen to Smartlist a lot. I've been watching their show of their tour of the, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but they've been, the podcast Smartlist.
No.
Jason Bateman.
Yeah, Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes, I believe, the guy from Will and Grace.
Okay.
It's hilarious. They've like everybody wants to be on their podcast now. Like Joe Biden has been on it. They just have this show that they went on the road. It's become so popular that they've gone on the road and done a tour. And like in New York, Dave Letterman came on the podcast, but the show it's on like HBO Max. But it's interesting because they're talking about, they're chronicling the tour, and there's a lot of like behind the scenes footage, which is cool. They're just hilarious dudes who just giving each other shit nonstop, super funny. But they're talking about that, how to approach their podcast, like when they're doing it in a live setting. And it's just interesting watching the process, and they're kind of altering it as they go, kind of like what you're talking about. So like, do we involve the crowd in it or not? And they kind of switch it up depending on the crowd and the venue. You should check it out. It's some funny shit.
This is it right here.
Yep, that's the one.
Okay. Yeah, actually, it's funny that you brought this up, because we have this Ophelia's thing coming up next month, and that's like the biggest thing that No Simple Road has ever done. Right. We've never done
nice.
a venue. It's the night before the Dicks run. We're doing it with Andy Frasco in his podcast. And so for us to get up there and just do No Simple Road isn't going to cut it. Like, it's just not. So we've been talking about what we're going to do. Like, Mel actually is the one that has been spearheading, like, look, we can't just get up there and bullshit. Like, what are we going to do? And it's mildly terrifying, man, to be honest. I don't know yet 100%. And
Yeah.
a lot of what we've done, like with No Simple Road, one episode I've scripted questions. Other than that, I've never scripted a question for a guest. I'll do some research and then we just have a conversation. We kind of approach doing interviews on the show the same way a band would approach improv with each other. Like, we know what key we're going to be in and we just go. Kind of what we do. But doing that live, can't, with just the three of us, like, I can't do that, right? So what? So we're in the midst of trying to work that out. And then also, like I said, having the component of people watching you when you're in the comfort of your own home and the only people there are your family and somebody on a Zoom screen, you can pick your nose or cough or, like, whatever. When you're on stage in front of people, it's a whole different thing, man. Like,
for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be awesome. You guys always seem to rise to the occasion. Are you possibly getting guests during that?
It looks like Chris Pandolfi's going to join us from the Dusters.
Yeah, awesome.
And then I can't say who it is, but there's a very special guest coming with Frasco.
Nice.
Yeah. And
Madonna.
Yeah, actually, damn it. How'd you guess already? Yeah. She's going to do her whole, like, rap on the Kabbalah. It's going to be, you guys are going to love it.
Yeah. That's my favorite sect of Judaism. We're actually all members of the tribe, just to quick side thought there.
I love that.
Yeah.
As it should be. See, we are taking over entertainment.
I always find it interesting.
We can say that.
Yeah.
I've definitely talked to Jordan about it, but the thread of MOT in the Grateful Dead and Phish community, I get it, and it makes more sense now, but the Grateful Dead community going way back, it's just interesting. I don't know. I think I always wonder culturally, I think as a group, I know we're a communal group, stereotypically and culturally, right? The whole thing is about sharing and stories and passing along tradition and things. So I kind of get it. And I wonder if,
Wandering.
Yeah. But yeah. And I just wonder if there's that, why we always find that those pockets of, not even pockets, these like, cross sections of like big demographic chunks of certain audiences. And like that could be my sociology talking, but like, I always find it fascinating.
Absolutely.
It's such a cross section of when you are at a show, like, think about the last Dead and Company show that just happened and looking out at that crowd. If you think about the walks of life that are in that venue, right? And I wonder if people of other religions, ethnicities, proclivities, whatever, are finding the same experience that we've had like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, wow, I'm in this thing and I'm always finding my people here.
Right. That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it depends on the group, right?
Yeah. Sounds like a good episode. Future podcast.
For sure.
Yeah, very interesting. Because we're such a small, sliver of the population, it always seems like, oh wow, okay, but what's the parallel to that, in this scene?
Aren't we like
I don't know.
1% or something like that? Jewish
That
people are
sounds-
like 1% of the American population.
The world, it's
so.
like less than that, I
Maybe.
think.
Oh wow.
0.006.
Got your numbers.
Yeah.
Check that out.
I'm gonna fact check you later, Jordan.
The math checks out.
Yeah.
Speaking of facts, I was just going to say, like, the other thing that I find so interesting about this community from the music side is that, and the cultural and the psychedelic and, everything about, I guess my point is that there's so much to chew on for every different group. So like what attracted me to them initially was, I like the music, but I was much more interested in their approach to it. And like the first tape I heard that I listened to over and over was 4787, and they play Hell in a Bucket and they fuck it up completely and they restart it. Now,
wow.
Yeah, they're like, we're going to try this again. And I was like, what the fuck? But it was, no one gave, it was funny. Everyone, cheered and went nuts. And I was like, okay. And then I was getting a sense of like, they play something different. Every show is truly different. Every performance is truly different. That's very cool. Now I want to hear every single version and all that stuff. And then, so like, I guess from a stats or whatever perspective, I got really into that. And then that same pattern happened more like with Panic too, where I was like, let's listen to all the, the discos in 94. When did they start putting in that, drum intro or whatever, and then I don't know, that just because there's so much material, and Bobby talks about this too, right? Like he's like, when he's with a new band, he's like, we're only like 5 years into it and we got to really get through the material, and it's just, I get it. Like there's so much, but it's interesting to look at, I don't know, because I always run into those stats heads, and we saw, and obviously on every one of these bands has that little group of folks who are really into the stats, whether it's, back in the day, the bootleg trader guys, those guys. And now it's just folks who just keep track of set lists or when the last time, I think I saw the other night where Trey was like, here's a You Enjoy Myself because it's been 20 years since we played one in Atlanta. And thank you for wearing that t-shirt. There's somebody who's wearing the t-shirt or something that said you haven't played it in 20 years. And like, someone's keeping track. Anyway, it's just
didn't have a guy that would like stand in the front row, the stats keeper guy, Phish, right? With the stop.
Yeah, I think that they had, I think they had to ask him to, from what I heard, they had to ask him to not do that because it was too distracting.
He's bumming Trey out.
Wow.
Yeah, wild. Getting back to venues and all that, Aaron, tell us some of your favorite venues. This is not a scripted question. This is just popped into my head.
Wow. Favorite. Okay. So that's a tough question. I really, really enjoy the Cuthbert Amphitheater. And this has nothing to do with anything other than like I saw probably one of my top 2 favorite shows ever in my whole life there was Cheese a few years ago. And it was like, those times in life when like the vibe of the show, the music that the band is playing, the weather, the people that you're with all like click at the same time. It's like the perfect moment. It was like pouring rain and it was hot out and it felt so good and the music was awesome and the light show was amazing and I was with my family and it was dope and it was at the Cuthbert. So like I love that place. Yeah. But I would say too, I loved seeing shows at the Oakland Coliseum back in the day. There was something special that would happen in that venue during drums that I haven't found anywhere else. That place levitated. Like I felt like the Coliseum was physically taking off during drums and in Oakland several times. I remember like a Chinese New Year show. I don't remember what year it was, like 91 or 90. And I was sure that thing had ripped off its foundation. Like Mickey was hitting the beast and I was like standing kind of side stage and I could see him hit the beast and then nothing, like no sound would happen. And then the foundation of the place just started rumbling and you could like, your shirt was moving. So yeah, Oakland. And then, I really liked Climate Pledge too, man.
Yeah, that was, once we could figure out how to get to our seats, we really enjoyed that venue.
Wait, we had seats for where they were. Yeah, no, that the sound in there was great. And I like that it's, it's green.
Yeah. As is in their name. Yeah, that venue, like not to self-promote too much, but that was kind of like for me like a case in point of why Venue Llama could be helpful. Just like we had club seats and we just like remember the first night we couldn't figure out how to get down there. And it was a new venue, like they had refurbished it. And we're looking around, there was like all sorts of people confused. And there was like particular escalators that we needed to take to get to this particular section. But there's also like, that's part of the fun also, the adventure part of it is going into these situations and not knowing things and figuring it out. At the same time, you're fired up and you want to see the show and you want to make sure that you're there on time. So I remember like I had posted in a Reddit thread just about Venue Llama, and there was some guy like who's like, isn't that, just the whole adventure part is just not knowing, what you're getting into and figuring it out. And I get all that totally,
Sure.
At the same time, it's also nice to know certain things,
Well, that's like the guy that never uses the Maps app on his phone ever. He just goes for it.
All right. It's still lost right now.
Yeah. He's still driving around going, it's the adventure, man. I really dig it.
Climate Pledge was cool. And like, that's the thing. There's so many, I saw Phish after Climate Pledge in Berkeley a few days after. And, that venue is so different than Climate Pledge and, so historic and more intimate and super cool. At the same time, there's people that can't stand that venue because shows like Phish, you need to get in line, if you want to secure a good spot and make sure that you're in when the show starts. You have to get in line at like, no later than like 12 o'clock. And that's the kind of thing that's good to know. Yeah. I mean, we got there like the first day we got there at 3, which is, still relatively early to get in line. And we were kind of pushing it. Like, we did get in the show in time, but we were so far back the line. And it was fun. You always meet cool people on the line, but San Fran is also a cool town to check out.
You reminded me too. I have to say, I think after this conversation and thinking about it, my favorite was the Hollywood Bowl ever. Period.
Yeah.
That they're
nice.
Whatever they are doing there, they're doing it right, man. That just the sound everywhere. I was all over that place. Everywhere it sounded great. Security was sweet everywhere I went. The entry process, it was a little congested getting in, but whatever. It's a Phish show. But like, I don't know any other venue where like they're selling full glass bottles of wine and beer that you can take to your spot where you're going. My daughter brought in a picnic basket with food to have a picnic in there. There's a spot down at the bottom of the venue where it's like little cordoned off areas with tables, and apparently there's waiters that come and will bring you beer and wine and whatever to your little corral.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting too to think about that, and how it translates to the show too. And like the musicians, they can that affects them in some way too. Like if
Huge part of the show.
if the experience is that much better or smoother, for the show goer, it's gonna reverberate to the band too. And I think that another shameless plug here, like part of our mission is just to make the experience better and to have venues step up their game. We want venues to hear what people are saying and to learn from it. And like there was for example, there was a fella who is going to be on tonight's podcast with us, Brian Harding, that runs film platform and Instagram. And he has been like, one of the things that he's doing is making it a mission to like highlight water policies.
I love it. I was going to bring it up. I love it, man.
Yeah. And he's having an effect, they're like Trey actually, I think Trey was playing in Asbury Park and it was New Jersey. And he was highlighting the fact that they were not allowing people to bring in water and charging like $8 or whatever amount for water. And like through his efforts on social media, like it ended up getting through to the venue, and the venue changed their policy. Trey ended up reposting it on his page, and it made the experience better and safer and all that. And that's just like a microcosm of what we can accomplish and what is happening, and how the bands are behind that too. They obviously, the better experience it is for fans, the better it's going to be for them and their touring experience. And just overall,
I think it was on Reddit maybe, or I don't remember exactly, but I saw an old rider of Phish's from like, I don't know, a long time ago.
Yeah.
And a rider for a band is what they need when they show up at a venue. And a lot of their rider, this old one, had to do with the fans and like making sure that security wasn't static with the people that were there, and also making sure that water was available for everybody for free. And it's, think about this: if you're in a band and you're playing a show, there's a few components that go into that. There's you in the band, there's the fans that are coming, and then the place that you're playing. That's about it, man. And so if the place that you're playing is treating the people that are there poorly, 2/3 of the experiment are not happening, and it's going to you're going to have a bad time. So
for sure,
it's important. And it's really cool to see a band like Phish and putting that in their contract. Like, you're not going to treat our people like shit. You're going to give them water because they're going to be tripping and thirsty and it's hot. And, your security is going to treat them with respect. A lot of them are out of their head, and keep that in mind.
I think that just doing a lot of this stuff, and I have little kids now. And so I can't wait to go to shows, because I'm learning so much about some of these venues now that I will now seek to go find a show to go, like the Orion, right? It's in Huntsville. Beautiful. And I just been seeing all these reviews, and I saw footage, and this is a venue that looks perfect, right? And so it's from being involved and reading a lot of this stuff that now I'm like, okay, I'm aware of this venue, and they're doing a pretty good job. Like, I think they were the venue. I had to actually get on the phone with them to learn some, I was like, what exactly is there was some venue that I called to get their specific water policy, and they were so nice. And by all accounts, and some of the reviews I've read of the show in particular, it starts out with such a nice, commentary about the Orion itself, the staff, just like, it's great. And you can see this, there's a trend now because like the venues, they understand they are competing with streaming and everything being instant and no one leaving their house. So, okay, then the experience has to be good. And then more than that, like anything else, people got to know that it's good, so that they come here not just for their favorite act or their favorite tour, but they come here just as an excuse to come here. And, I know for myself that that's definitely going to happen. I will choose to seek out events that I want to go to at specific venues now, whether it's like at the Bon Secours in Greenville or like, what is it called? Salvage Station in Asheville, or like any of these places that I hear good things about, bookmark, and then I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And word travels fast, like we hear all this stuff about how social media is terrible for kids, and there's definitely like the nefarious side to it, but like the positive side is like, like word about venues does travel fast within this community. And like what you were talking about, the Orion, it's like I wouldn't normally go to Alabama, but I want to see a show there, and like I just saw Panic in St. Augustine because been hearing about how great that venue is, and it's just become a thing. Like the band feels it, and it's just become this thing. And like I know, like we've talked about this, but like the older that I get, I just am more choosy about where I'm gonna go and what shows I'm gonna see, and just realizing like what you were saying there, just how much it just ties into the show. Like Cuthbert,
huge.
It's just it's huge. And granted, you can also go to a crappy venue and
have a
the music is so good, and it's you can go to the Crystal Ballroom where it's freaking hot as shit, and the sight lines aren't good, and the sound's not great, and
I've had some great shows there, man. I love that place.
Yeah, so there's that too. The music is always gonna prevail, but
what you guys are doing too is providing an avenue for pressure on the venues, right? So think about online sellers on eBay or even restaurants on Yelp, right? If you know that you're, as a business, if you know you're being reviewed by the people that are using your service, you're going to step up your game a little bit more, because you don't want that person to leave and go, this place is a piece of shit, and that's going to show up at the top of your reviews, and now nobody's going to come. You know what I mean?
Great.
And that's actually a great thing.
Yeah, totally. And we want to figure out ways to, we don't want it to be like some sort of like adversarial relationship with venues. We want to work with them too in some way, and just, figure out ways where we can, just make the experience better for everybody. And too, like, it's so cool. Like with your podcast too, like you have this avenue to kind of highlight just all different aspects of music and culture around it, and all that. It's cool to, just realize that like for you, like have this audience, and I don't know, I'm curious like how you think about it, like as you've grown as a podcast and your audience has grown, and you're like, do you think about like the power that you have and like influence, and does it change like your thinking at all about how like the effect that can have, or you just kind of stick to what you do and let that all just kind of fall into place?
I think if I thought about that too much, it might lock me up. Not that we have some grand magic wand wielding power or anything, but we do have an audience, and people do listen to the show. And I think if I got too far into what that means, I would have a hard time. Yeah, I think I know
your job is to shed light, not to master.
Not to master, absolutely. Like yeah, man. And from the jump, like we've been pretty brutally honest with ourselves and everybody else on the show about who we are and what we do. We don't really hide much. You know,
No.
the only subject that is taboo on our show is politics. We don't do that. We don't touch that area of the world at all. That's not our space.
What about pizza?
Definitely talk about pizza. I love pizza.
Do you think that you see music differently now that you've been doing the podcast? Do you like approach it differently? Like, all right, I don't know. Do you have that mindset of, okay, now that I'm a podcast host, I have to keep this, you know what I mean?
No, not like that. But it did affect how I see the music, and it kind of like became my mission of part of my why of doing the show. So I'll use Oteil as an example. I loved Dead and Company before we ever talked to Oteil. When I talked to Oteil and we forged a relationship with him, when I now go to a Dead and Company show, my experience of the show is completely different because I'm seeing my friend play up there on the stage, right? And it's huge. So my experience of seeing the music is completely different and deeper on another level, right? And then I realized that like I'm having this experience with all these folks that we're talking to, and then I'm going to the show and like this thing is happening for me. And I was like, oh my God, we can provide that same thing to the people that listen to the show. Like they can hear this, get to know the person, then go see them play and have a deeper experience of the music that they're seeing. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, but not like I'm a podcaster now, so I have to see this different. Now it's like, well, now my friends are up there and I'm pulling for them and they're giving me an experience and I know who they are and why they're doing what they're doing and what's behind it. So it's more fulfilling.
That's super cool. That's
great. It's been awesome.
Great insight right there.
Do you have is there any venue that you haven't been to yet that you like need to go to?
I really want to go to Radio City. I've never seen a show there. And Hampton. I've never been to Hampton. Yeah.
Nice.
I got to see a show at Hampton.
One of my first concerts. One of my first concerts when I was a kid was at Radio City, The Pretenders, 84, maybe 83, and The Alarm. Do you remember The Alarm?
Oh yeah.
They opened. I went with my folks. It's great.
I think my first concert was The Cars in Vegas.
Ooh,
excellent.
Nice. The first time I was at Radio City was to see the Rockettes, like the Christmas.
Oh wow.
My mom was a guidance counselor at where I ended up going to junior high, and they were taking like a 9th grade trip there, and I was able to tag along, and I was super psyched, mainly because like there were some cute girls in junior high, and I think I still know them. Yeah, that too. But I did end up going, in my first rock and roll show there was Jimmy Harrian's first show in Widespread Panic when he took over. I happened to be back in Long Island for my nephew's birth, and turned out to be when Jimmy was playing his first show. Took the train into New York City, and it was so cool. The venue is awesome, and it was like this like breath of fresh air with Widespread. It was just like this new era, and it was cool. It was just like personally, like that time of life, like I just met Jamie. My nephew was born. It was like my dad's birthday the next day.
Oh God. Yeah. One of those shows like I was talking about.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, just getting back to all of it, that just like these concert experiences we have just are so such a huge part of our lives. And
dude,
and
I'm not taking vacations doing anything else. I don't do anything else anymore. Like anything I travel to do is to go see music. Like
you're an avid birder though.
Yeah, I gotta do bird watch all the time. Yeah, I could just do that on my porch though.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Aaron,
Yeah, man.
for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. It's been amazing to watch
Really
your,
good to talk to you, man. I dig your insights for sure. Is glad to finally sit down with you and just
Same.
Really enjoyed it.
Same. And we got to have you guys on No Simple Road too.
Yeah, we would love to
awesome.
to do that for sure. Yeah.
Right on.
Pencil us in.
I think I know a guy that can get it scheduled.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks for your support. I know you also wrote a review or 2 or 3 on the site, so thank you. And
man.
We're new content creators. We're now in the content creating game too, and anything. And we're trying to. I find you quite inspirational. I like your story. I like that. It's really inspirational. So
appreciate that.
Yeah, we appreciate your supporting us, and it's like where we are right now, like where you were years ago, and like we have that same mindset. Like we don't have as much traction right now, but like whatever we can do to help you, like we keep saying, we're all in this together, and
that's
look forward.
That's
forward to it.
Biggest thing with No Simple Road when we very first started, when we were like getting to the point where we could take on a sponsor, we all sat down and I was like, look, actually Mel was integral in being like, look, I don't want to sell mattresses. Like we need to do this right. And I was like, you know what? Let's keep it in the family. Let's hit up people that like are part of our scene and part of our world, that we can support each other and help each other grow. And so that's what this was when I reached out to you, Jordan, and also with Venue Llama. And yeah, man, anything we can do, let's onward and upward for all of us.
All right. Couldn't say it any better.
Yep. Love you guys.
All right.
Yeah,
thanks,
man.
man.
Back at you.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.
See you Saturday.